thinking more about expertise
Okay.
because our
Mhm.
intuition is based on our expertise.
Yep.
And all of my all of my career, the driving factor is not intuition per se. It's on how do people develop expertise? How can you help them develop it more quickly and more effectively? That's our shadow box technique is designed to help people build expertise. So the core cognitive process for me is the development and application of expertise. Okay, so let me start by
Mhm.
saying you should never completely trust your intuition
Yep.
because your intuition can mislead you. And we have
Yep.
plenty of examples of that where the intuition was saying, here's a first course of action. Let me mentally simulate it. No, it's not going to work. What else can I do? So the immediate thought was not going to be workable. So we should never trust our intuition, but we should always listen to it because our intuition is how our experience is speaking to us. And it's usually telling us something useful. When can we trust it? When should we listen to it more carefully? When is it more valuable for us? It's more valuable for us when we're working in a domain, in a situation where we've had a chance to gain experience and to build expertise. Okay, so here's the story of my collaboration with Danny Kahneman.
Yes.
And I never liked the title of our article, A Failure to Disagree, because it took us 5 years to write it because we disagreed about so many things. And that was the basis for the collaboration.
Mhm.
So Danny wins his Nobel Prize, and I sent him an email and I just acknowledged the win and told him how richly deserved it was for his work
Mhm.
on heuristics and biases and his earlier work on attention, which I liked very much also. And and then he wrote me back and invited me to visit with him in Princeton.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode at The Intuitive Leader. My name is Maurice Jenkins, and I am so excited to, together with you, listen to Dr. Gary Klein. For those of you who know Gary Klein, he will probably need no introduction at all. But for everyone else, Dr. Gary Klein is an absolute giant in the field of macrocognition, naturalistic decision making, and intuition in general. Gary is a cognitive psychologist who helped to initiate the naturalistic decision making movement and, among others, developed the recognition primed decision model to describe how people actually make decisions in natural settings. This model has been at the basis for changes in the ways the US Marines and the US Army train their officers to make decisions under pressure. Besides training military personnel, he and his teams have also worked with perceptual skills training for nurse students, de-escalation and tactical decision making for police officers, and of course the practical decision making tools for making decisions under pressure for office leaders such as myself. He has also led a team that developed the artificial intelligence quotient toolkit for increasing the usability of AI machine learning systems. Gary started publishing as of 1970, which is 5 years before I was born, and has since then published over 150 works. He's the author of 7 books and co-edited another 3. I'm going to mention to you 3 books he has written: The Sources of Power, The Power of Intuition, which I can highly recommend, as well as Seeing What Others Don't. He has also worked together with the late Daniel Kahneman and with him co-written a publication called Failure to Disagree. And I'm already looking forward to that aspect of our talk today. Gary has been on TEDx Talks, a zillion podcasts, and literally been traveling all over the planet to promote his work on intuition. He holds a BA in psychology, a PhD in experimental psychology, and currently holds the office as chief scientist at Shadowbox, the company he founded in 2015. He's the father of 2 the happy grandfather of six, and he is currently living and working in the Boston area. Gary, I'm absolutely delighted to have you on. So, big welcome to my podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Maurice. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, and it's an absolute honor to have you here. So, the first question I always ask to my guest is, what is intuition to you?
Intuition is the way we use our experience to guide us. It's that simple. And um, intuition guides us in sizing up a situation, knowing what's happening around us. And intuition guides us about what we ought to do about it. And so it has those kinds of functions. Um, and what's important, there's so many things important in that simple formulation. One, it's based on experience. It's not based on anything occult or supernatural. There's no ESP involved or anything like that, but it can sometimes feel like it's supernatural because we don't know where our intuitions come from. So we don't have a conscious experience of how they arrived. But we're fairly clear from the research we've done that our intuitions come from the patterns we've built up as we've gained more experience and as we've built more expertise. And this pattern matching gives us an immediate recognition of what's going on and how it can be handled.
Interesting, interesting. And how would you describe macrocognition? What is it explained in layman's terms, if you like?
Okay, so cognition has to do with thinking,
Hmm?
and macrocognition is part of the movement that I helped to found on naturalistic decision making. So macro cognition is thinking in real world settings, in messy, confusing, ambiguous, uncertain, complex settings. And it's the set of cognitive functions that we perform that are essential to our lives and our professions. Um, about decision making, about sense making, making sense of situations, about detecting problems, all of those sorts of things. And the reason we call it macrocognition is to distinguish it from microcognition,
Hmm?
which is the a more precise study of cognitive processes that's usually conducted under controlled conditions in laboratories.
Okay, all right, all right. And where in this picture does tacit knowledge come in? But a little bit the second question, like, is tacit knowledge the same thing as intuition, or is it sort of the foundation for intuition to work on, or how does that play in here?
I would say the latter. It's the foundation for intuition to work. And so tacit knowledge is um, the kind of expertise we build up, and it's in the form that we can't readily articulate. So that's why it doesn't get as much attention. But the ability to recognize things, to make perceptual discriminations. And people with expertise can make finer discriminations than other people can. If you ask them, how do you do it? They can't tell you because it's tacit knowledge. But it's not occult knowledge. It's simply that they have had so many experiences and so much good feedback that they're able to sharpen their perception. Tacit knowledge includes our mental models, which are the beliefs, especially the causal beliefs that we've learned about how the world works. We don't
Mhm.
know what all these beliefs are, but we have them and they guide us.
Yeah, yeah. Unaware patterns and underlying knowledge that we sort of, the way I say it usually is we have saved it, we have stored the knowledge in our long-term memory, but actually without actually being aware of it.
Right, right.
But the interesting part comes, of course, when we apply it and hopefully right. And then you have, among other, worked with the recognition primed decision model, right?
Right.
How would you describe that for someone that has never heard of the terminology?
All right. So this came about by surprise. We didn't expect it. We had so here's the story. We got this contract from the Army Research Institute, and they wanted to understand how do people make tough decisions, often life and death decisions, under extreme time pressure and uncertainty. And they knew that the formal decision analysis approaches take too long, that if people try to rely on them, they'll be paralyzed. And yet
Mm,
good commanders are able to rapidly respond to unexpected events. How does that happen? So, how do people manage time pressure and uncertainty? So, this was a competition. And
mm,
I'm imagining that most of the competitors we had said, we'll take a laboratory task, study it with college students, and vary time pressure and uncertainty. But we didn't want to do that because we didn't know how this was accomplished. And instead of studying it in the laboratory, we said, let's talk to people who are really good about it. And we talked to firefighters because they have to make rapid life and death decisions under time pressure and uncertainty. How do they do it? And we had an idea that they probably had like a most likely option that they wanted and a second option, maybe a third in their hip pocket just in case. And they compared them to see
mm.
which they didn't do any of that. The first firefighter that I ever interviewed, I said, I'm here to study how you make decisions. And he said, I've been a firefighter for 16 years. I've been a captain for 12 of those years. In all that time, I don't think I've ever made a single decision. And that wasn't what I wanted to hear. I recoiled because we were just starting out this project and we were already stumbling because we picked a domain where people don't make decisions. I said, how do you know what to do? And he said, oh, it's just procedures. You just follow the procedures. Well, that was
Mm.
very discouraging to hear. And I said to him, before I finish with you, can I see the procedure manual? Maybe there'd be something in there that I can use. And he said, oh, it's not written down. You just know.
Yeah.
And and so that meant maybe we were on the right path, but we were using the wrong words. So for
Mm,
him, making decisions meant comparing options. And we interviewed over 20, I think maybe close to 30 firefighters about their tough cases, about how they made their the decisions in these environments. And the first issue was that they were telling us they didn't compare options. They just looked at a situation and knew what to do. How could you do that? I always thought you had to generate a bunch of options, maybe even just two, and then pick the best. And he's telling me, I thought that was radical. And he was telling me, no, we don't even generate two. We just know what to do. How could they accomplish that? From the pattern matching. They would
mm.
see a situation and it evoked a range of prior events, prior incidents that fused together as a pattern and guided him in terms of what to look for, what to expect, what goals to pursue, and what were the kinds of actions that were likely to be successful. So that's why he could immediately size up the situation and know what to do. That solved the first mystery, but we had a second mystery. How do you evaluate one option? I always thought at that point, I thought the only way to evaluate an option is to compare it to another option to see
Mm.
which is best. But he's only generating one option. So there's nothing to compare. So we went back into our interview notes to see what we could learn. And what they were saying was, here's what popped into my mind. But then I ran it through my head to see if that would work in this situation. And so they were imagining what would happen if they put it into play. We call it mental simulation. They were simulating in their head how it would work. And if it
Yes.
worked, then they could do it. If
Mm,
it almost worked, they could repair it and come up with something better. And if they couldn't figure out any way to make it work, then they say, "What else can I do?" And they'd keep going down the in their repertoire until they found something that could happen. So this is called a recognition primed decision model. It's not just recognition. The first part is recognizing the situation, and then the second part is evaluating an option by this deliberate, conscious mental simulation process. And there's also a third part of trying to build stories to explain complex situations that you haven't seen before. So the recognition prime decision model is a blend of intuition, which is the pattern matching part, and the mental simulation and story building part, which is an analytical part. It's a blend of intuition and analysis.
Oh, really interesting. And this the recognition part, and then to evaluate that mentally, if you like, by visualizing possible outcomes, that can go. I'm just going to say instantly, at least very fast. It has to go very fast. I mean, you've been writing about it in the book I've read, The Power of Intuition, and some very strong stories about life-saving moments where a captain at least quickly recognized that something was off without actually knowing why it was off, just before the house collapsed, basically.
Right.
This is very interesting, and it brings me a little bit to the question, like, when, according to you, is intuition most applicable? When is it most useful to follow your intuition? Maybe that differs per, say, worker category. I mean, if you're working with as a fire worker or as a manager in an office, maybe there are different moments. But according to you, when is intuition the most usable? What circumstances?
Okay. So let me start by
Hmm?
saying you should never completely trust your intuition
Yep.
because your intuition can mislead you. And we have
Yep.
plenty of examples of that where the intuition was saying, here's a first course of action. Let me mentally simulate it. No, it's not going to work. What else can I do? So the immediate thought was not going to be workable. So we should never trust our intuition, but we should always listen to it because our intuition is how our experience is speaking to us, and it's usually telling us something useful. When can we trust it? When should we listen to it more carefully? When is it more valuable for us? It's more valuable for us when we're working in a domain, in a situation where we've had a chance to gain experience and to build expertise. So we have a chance to see different kinds of challenges and to handle different kinds of challenges and to get feedback, to try things, to succeed, to fail, to diagnose why we failed. So when you've been able to tutor your intuition, to build your intuition, that's when it's going to be the most valuable. When it's something that's totally unfamiliar, then intuition becomes much less um, much less helpful. On the other hand, if you try to use analytical techniques in that kind of a situation, it's even less helpful. So you're just in a bad place.
Yes, yes. And what I like about your work is that you are combining the, well, rational thought with intuitive processing. And the combination of the two is maybe where the real magic happens, if they reinforce each other or back each other up or cover for each other.
Let
And
me
yeah,
interrupt
sure.
you there for a second. So many people mischaracterize the recognition prime decision model as saying it's just about intuition and gut feeling. And that misses the point that it has this analytical component as well as an intuitive component. It's a blend of the pattern matching and the mental simulation. You need both.
Yes, I personally fully agree with that. It's in my logo. If you can see it, it's supposed to be a brain with two halves, left and right. That's the idea. Um, but how did you how did you get to work with the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marines? Because that sounds big, and I know it has become big. It has become a big thing. But how did you get into that? I mean, why did they hire Gary Klein? Because at that time you were younger and less experienced is as what you are today.
Right. Why would they be stupid enough to hire
Well,
as inexperienced as me? They did it because they were desperate. They knew that they had to help commanders make tough decisions under time pressure and uncertainty. They had tried the academic research path. They had tried the decision analysis models and multi-attribute utility theory, and it hadn't bought them anything. And all the efforts and all the funding that had gone into it hadn't achieved anything. And I was talking to somebody at the Army Research Institute, and he said, "We're desperate to find some other approach."
mm,
And we had this contract I mentioned that we did with the firefighters where we competed, and they may have awarded other people parallel contracts, but ours was so successful that we got continuation funding, and that started it. And then the next thing that happened was at the Army Research Institute, a very wise and powerful woman, Judith Orosano, put together a program of people who were working in naturalistic environments, who are studying decision making, not in a controlled laboratory setting, but in real world settings. And she put together a program of these researchers. And because of the work I had done with firefighters, I was included in that program. So everything's built from there.
yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating. It just if you come from a background or a world where the analytical skills, so let's say the logical brain or the left brain, are sort of put on a pedestal where it's the all and everything, then it's almost like you have to prove the value of intuition, of the right part of the brain, if you like. And sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you have to do it the other way around, where we are talking to people that are fully, convenient and comfortable with the whole aspect, the whole notion of the intuitive mind. I almost have to convince them, like, wait a minute, you also have a logical mind. It seems to come back to that. And when I hear you talk about the army, they hadn't tried this before, basically, if I hear you correctly.
They had not as an official type of training to put into practice,
Yeah,
but
with measurements. Yeah,
they had tons of military history to draw on of people like Napoleon who
yeah,
could immediately size up a situation, know what was happening, and know how he had to adapt. So they had this was in their military history, but they hadn't, they were so, at that point, they were so gripped by
mm,
the formal logical analytical mode that they were having trouble letting go of that, except that it just wasn't working when they tried to use it for training.
yeah. Yeah, and one problem is that the logical mind, we all know, it communicates with us through words, syntax, meaning, numbers, data. It's easy for our brains to process.
Right.
The intuitive mind, if you like, or our intuition, doesn't do that. It communicates in a different way. It communicates with, well, let's call it hunches or feelings or a form of sensation, vaguely describable. How do you how do you measure that? Or basically, what did you do with the American army that you got them to follow a feeling? How did you do that? Or do you have an example of where you had one of those captains or officers telling you, damn, this works?
Um,
I realized these were two questions, by the way, in one. Sorry.
so working with a friend and colleague of mine, John Schmidt, we turned the recognition prime decision model, mostly it was his work, into a planning model, a recognition prime planning model. and developed it because the Army has doctrine about how you're supposed to plan, and it's very systematic, very orderly, very time consuming, and not particularly valuable. But this is, a military planning process. They call it military decision making process to go through all these steps. And we said, but in combat, people don't have time to do it, and people aren't doing it. They need something better. So we developed a better planning approach that these put experience at the core of it and put expertise at the core rather than coming in at the end to evaluate. And so we developed it and put on a training program for the Army just to demonstrate it. We wrote about it, and then we got messages. At that point, the military was fighting in Afghanistan, and we got messages from captains, company commanders, saying how valuable this kind of approach was. This was really helpful for them
Wow. Mm.
to handle a tough situation. So we got field affirmation about this approach.
That is that's big. That's strong. I know you've worked with Daniel Kahneman, the late Daniel Kahneman. Um,
Right.
for those of us who don't know him or have not heard of him, he has won the Nobel Prize for economics or the behavior of people, how to take risks, financial risks, if I explain it very, very briefly. And you've co-produced or co-written a publication called shortened Failure to Disagree. And it's very interesting because you're friends. You told me that you were friends, and I'm just curious about how you got to know each other, or and I mean failure to disagree. Why were you believing you would disagree, and how come that you actually agreed?
Okay, so here's the story of my collaboration with Danny Kahneman.
Yes.
And I never liked the title of our article, A Failure to Disagree, because it took us 5 years to write it because we disagreed about so many things. And that was the basis for the collaboration.
Mm,
So Danny wins his Nobel Prize, and I sent him an email and, I just acknowledged the win and told him how richly deserved it was for his work on heuristics and biases and his earlier work on attention, which I liked very much also. And and then he wrote me back and invited me to visit with him in Princeton where he was teaching. What I hadn't known at the time is that when the Army Research Institute was evaluating proposals, they asked Danny to look at some of the proposals, and Danny had a chance to look at the proposal that we had for doing the work on recognitional decision making, and was an advocate for it. So I didn't know at that point that Danny had helped advance my work, my career with the Army. So I trek off to Princeton because it sounds like it'll be interesting to spend a day or two with Danny.
yep.
And he invited me to do a collaboration, but it's a certain type of collaboration. It's an adversarial collaboration. He had
Interesting.
the idea that too often in science, you have people taking one position and taking with people taking another, and they're clashing, and these people are trying to show these people don't know what they're talking about, and these people are trying to show they don't know what they're talking about, and it's always filled with conflict
Mm,
rather than with a mutual desire to see what can we do together. So he was kind of pioneering this notion of an adversarial collaboration, and he knew that I came from a different tradition than he did. His heuristics and biases tradition is very different from my naturalistic decision making tradition and my approach. And so, but he thought there might be a basis for us to team up and study are there conditions under which intuitive expertise can be useful and valuable. And so this was from the outset an attempt to bring two intellectual adversaries together into a collaboration. So it
Yeah.
started with disagreement. The foundation was that we disagreed to see what we could learn together. And it took us 5 years, and we identified some critical requirements for intuitive judgments to be helpful and to have an impact.
Yeah,
Uh,
and Gary, if I just may join in and maybe explain if someone is listening now that in my words, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in my words, Daniel Kahneman had his theory of rational thought and intuitive thought, where the process of making a decision should follow first a very detailed or thorough rational thought. So that you get a feel for what you're doing. And at the end of that process, you make a decision, a judgment of some sort. And that's where you tap into your intuition because you've built up an inner knowing about what you've been working with. Whereas if I listened or read your stuff well, it's you start off with intuition and you combine that with rational thought basically all the way through the process. This is my way of summarizing it. And so is that correct?
is correct. And as Danny put it, and we wrote it in our article, even at the end of the collaboration, we did not agree. I mean, we still had our own different positions, although we came up with something that we thought was very valuable, and we had our own emotional reactions. And Danny wrote this. He said he love stories where experts, so-called experts, are shown to be wrong and to blunder. And Gary loves stories where experts see things others don't and are masterful. And that's true. Those are our different preferences.
Yes, yes, very much. And but you, in the end, after 5 years, you failed to disagree, or at least you came to the conclusion that you had a lot more in common in the way you perceived it than you thought, or you at least, as you pointed out, you came to a common view, right?
But it's not magical, and it comes from building up patterns. It comes from getting repeated opportunities to build experiences and to reflect on the experiences and to get feedback. So that was the way we balanced it.
You became friends, real friends.
Yes, I think that more than anything else carried the collaboration through 5 years is that even when we were arguing, we enjoyed getting together. We
Yeah.
enjoyed that opportunity. And so that was a critical part. And Danny has written that he's done several adversarial collaborations, and he said that the one that he did with me was the one that he considered the most successful.
No, that's a big compliment. And I have to say, I like the idea because if you truly do this with an open mind, which you have done, then you do create the stepping stone to get to a higher form of knowing, if you like, to a higher insight, right? Than just throwing mud at each other.
Exactly. Which is too often the way scientific and philosophical debates are framed as showing that your opponent is hopelessly muddled rather than
Yeah.
having a sympathetic attitude. I don't agree with this person, but they're smart and they're well intentioned. And so where are they coming from and what
Mhm.
can I do?
Yes. And what can I learn? I mean, there's always something you can learn,
Yes.
right? So, of all the works that you've done, that you've published, either written or that you've worked with projects, for example, what's the one that you feel most proud of or are most satisfied with?
That's like asking a parent which child he loves the most. And it's always the latest work that I've published. But if I tear myself out of that mindset, it would It would probably be my first book, Sources of Power: How People Make Decisions.
Okay.
And I'd never written a book before, didn't think that I could, and it came about by accident. Um, my wife Helen had a sabbatical, and we were on sabbatical, but I didn't have anything to do. I was just there with her and one of our children. The other one was in college. And I was jogging one day and I was visiting friends and sightseeing, not really anything professionally productive. And I was jogging, but it was a very rocky. It wasn't really a jogging path. It was just very rocky. And I said, it's only a matter of time before I twist an ankle. 10 minutes later, I twist an ankle. I break a bone in my ankle. I hobble back to our apartment, and now I'm stuck there for the next month, and I'm not going to be able to go out and travel and see the different things and visit different people. Very depressing, very discouraging. And I thought, I guess this is my time to write that book that I've been thinking about.
Mm,
And so I had a month and I figured if I can write 8 pages a day for the next 30 days, I'll get a good part of a first draft done. Let me do it. And so that's how Sources of Power came into being. It was a lucky break, as you might say.
lucky break. Well, let's not tempt the gods here, but that lucky break, I would like to have that as well. But let's not do anything stupid here. Okay. So about your course, the practical decision making course, I've seen it on your website Shadowbox, and I love the idea behind it. It's very structured, very clear. There's a clear pattern in it. Would you mind saying a few words about it? Because that's, if I get it right, it's also for people, for let's say white collar people, so leaders in offices.
It's for a wide variety of audiences.
Mm.
And it was a challenge I set to myself. I've been doing this for a few decades. Do I know anything that's useful?
I
Do I
think
know
you do.
anything that people who don't want to get into the research and don't want to do tons of reading, anything that would help them? And I just started jotting down the kinds of ideas, the kinds of techniques that we've developed that people could put into practice immediately. And from there came the notion, let's produce a course called a masterclass in practical decision making that doesn't go to any theory, into any theories or into any models, anything like that. And each episode, there's 15 episodes. And each one is just 5 minutes. So something that somebody could look at one of the episodes at the beginning of the day, and in 2 weeks, they would have it all. And so it's these 5 minute clips, each one presenting a different idea that people can immediately put into practice to improve their decision making.
That's really great. That's really, and everybody has 5 minutes, right? It's
Everybody has 5 minutes, yes.
interesting. And is that like an online course only, or is it even possible to combine that with a visit, if you like, from Shadowbox people, if not yourself, but your crew?
The course itself is available online, and
Mm.
so people can go to our website and order it and enjoy it. If they want to get into it more deeply, our Shadowbox team, we do this all the time, is we work with organizations to help build them training that goes much deeper than the course would. Yes.
Yes, and I can see that. I can see why, because the world is getting ever more messy, uncertain, unstable. If anything else, this is how you make decisions in uncertainty, where you run out of data, or where you can't control the data, or you can't be sure that the data is correct, or where it takes too long time to verify pieces of data, or that you have chosen the right data. At some point, you will have to start making your judgment before you can actually remove all the risks. You will actually, you will probably not be able to remove all the risks anyway.
Right. That's the essence of decision making under uncertainty. And there are people who are just so uncomfortable with uncertainty that they don't want to make a decision until they have all the data, as if
Yeah.
that would be possible. And they miss their opportunities. They miss
Mm.
their the time windows when the decision could have the greatest impact. But they're
Yes.
so uncomfortable with doing anything without sufficient data. And they have this firm belief that if they have enough data, they'll be able to make the right decision. But in a complex, ambiguous environment, which is the environment we all operate in, that's not going to happen. And so this belief in data is, I think, poorly founded, and people hold on to it because that's the way they've been trained, and it's very hard for them to give it up.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're touching on something that's, I believe, crucial. They're trained to think in, conditioned even to think in a certain way and to disregard something else. And I would like to argue that we shouldn't be data driven, but data informed.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and tacit knowledge is also data, however, stored in us, and it communicates in a different way, but it's still data.
Right. And you need to attend to it. You don't have to put all your chips on on that square and say, I'm going to totally trust it. But you should not ignore it because it's the sum of your prior experiences, and it's the expression of your expertise.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember from your book, The Power of Intuition, where you explain the sort of the trap that organizations can end up in when they so slavishly follow the routines and the rules and don't really question it. Just do as they've always done. And if something goes wrong, we'll create a new rule, a new set of rules and requirements for people to follow,
Right.
which makes it all very rigid.
Right.
And instead of really making sure that nothing ever goes wrong again, people sort of become less capable of taking decisions when it's really needed. And you explain that so well in that book, the where intuition actually has the advantage, if you like, or not advantage maybe, but it's more beneficial. Would you mind saying your few words to about that?
Okay, so um, let me tell you a story. This is a story about my younger daughter, Rebecca, who, when she went to college, was on the crew team. She would row, and during the summer, she'd be in competitions. And in the winter, it was too cold. She was in New York. They would have indoor rowing contests with rowing machines, and they were all calibrated. And her team and then another team would match up against each other for these competitions. So once she had a competition, and she told me this story, and the other team walked in, and they had one rower who is much taller than the rest. And height matters in rowing because it gives you that much more leverage. And so Rebecca looked at her and said, "This is if I'm gonna win, this is the person I have to beat." And she just sized her up that way. And they get off to a start, and this other rower, this other woman, is really going gangbusters. And Rebecca decides, I can't keep up with her. If she can, if these races were 2,000 meters, and if she can keep that pace for 2,000 meters, I simply can't match it. I'm not even going to try. I'm going to row at a pace that feels comfortable for me. But I don't think she can keep it up for 2,000 meters. I think she's just starting out strong. And I think she's going to slow down in the second 500. And as they're rowing along, in fact, the other woman has slowed down and Rebecca is closing the gap. And then Rebecca realizes at the rate we're rowing, I'm going to catch up to her at 1,500 meters. And she made a decision. And in rowing, the usual strategy is you row at your comfortable pace, and then the last 200 meters, then you kick. You really put it all out.
Mm,
And Rebecca said, if we get to the last 200 meters, she can outkick me. I'm not going to do that.
mm,
I'm going to start my kick at 500 meters from the end, much earlier. And I'm going to keep enough in reserve so that I can start the kick at that point. And so at 1,000 meters, Rebecca is still behind, and everybody, all of her friends are saying to her, "Keep going, Rebecca. You can win second. You can get a silver medal." And Rebecca thought, "I'm confident I'm going to win this race, and I'm the only one in this gym who knows it." And in fact, that's the way the race unfolded. She caught up at 1,500 meters, started her kick, and then won the race. And I tell the story because if you looked at the data, you would say Rebecca's going to lose this race because you wouldn't know what's her strategy. You wouldn't know how she conserved her energy. You wouldn't know any of these things. You would just look at the data and say the data shows that Rebecca is going to finish second. That's the problem with data. It doesn't show you the invisible factors behind the data and all of the issues that help you interpret what did the data mean, how were the data collected, and what are the kinds of additional factors that need to be taken into account. Yes.
And do you also have an example where you followed your intuition, where you were really aware of, this is my intuition telling me something or urging me something or giving me some prompt or hunch, and when you actually went with it?
So this actually had to do with a gut feeling. Early on, after I had started my company, Klein Associates,
Yep.
struggled for several years because I didn't have anything that was particularly useful that I was selling. And I landed a large contract, but I was tired of the struggle. And there was another company in the Dayton area that wanted to buy my company. And I thought, what a relief. I will sell it to them. I'll work for them. Won't have the stress. I won't have the hassle. And I kept meeting with the head of their office in Dayton to work out the details. And I verbally agreed to the sale. But I would come home from these meetings all knotted up.
Mm,
Just discussions with him. I have to go for a jog just to unwind. And that was my gut telling me, you don't really want to work with this person as your boss. This person isn't somebody that you have a good collegial connection. You're not going to have a good collegial connection with. And I didn't have any firm evidence, but it just felt wrong that I didn't want to spend time under his thumb. So I called him up and I said, deal is off. And he was furious, not at all understanding. I didn't expect him to be understanding. And then a year or two later, the parent company closed the Dayton office and everybody was out of work. So it turned out in my favor, but that was literally a gut feeling. I was so tight in interacting with him. It was telling me he's not somebody that you want to have as your boss.
no, interesting, interesting. So what you're describing now, Gary, in my world, I would label that as body intuition.
Right. And I will tell you that the person who put me in touch with him, who worked for him, I met with the person after to apologize for what I had for backing out of the deal and why that I just didn't feel the connection. And he said, "Oh, this guy is a toxic manager. That's why I wanted you to come join us to try to change the culture because he's so unpleasant." So
Wow.
it just confirmed what I would, but that came afterwards.
Wow. 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 There you have well, the proof, if you like, right? The recipe afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic story. I love that one. So I have, if we're running out of time, but I'm still able to squeeze in a few more questions, two or three only, and then we're done. But how did you start this journey with working with intuition? It's a very when you started it, there must have been a very niched area. It still is, I guess, to some extent.
I didn't set out on a journey to study intuition. I that wasn't part of the whole plan. Remember, the army wanted to know, how do people make decisions under time pressure and uncertainty? And all I wanted to do was study firefighters and see what I could learn. And to my surprise, I came up with a model, the recognition prime decision model, which has been replicated on a number of occasions, is probably one of the dominant models right now about how do
Mm.
people actually make decisions. And then I found out that the Marines were using the work, and they were talking about it as using intuition to make decisions. I had never used the word intuition, but if these tough Marines can talk about intuition, then maybe I could talk about it as well. So that's what sort of shifted me over into acknowledging the importance of intuition.
Fantastic. I love this. I love this. And for your information, I have been exchanging a few words with a high-ranking Swedish former army officer on a very high level, and he actually confirmed that they're doing something similar. They're having a similar kind of training program for their soldiers.
Right. We have done some collaboration with the Swedish military.
Interesting. Interesting. So, um, would you have any question for me, or is there something that you would want to mention that I've forgotten to highlight that you feel it's important that people hear or know?
Right. I would like to shift the focus
Yep.
from being so much on intuition,
Yep.
thinking more about expertise,
Okay.
because our
Mm.
intuition is based on our expertise.
Yep.
And I think for all of my career, the driving factor is not intuition per se. It's on, how do people develop expertise? How can you help them develop it more quickly and more effectively? That's our shadow box technique is designed to help people build expertise. So the core cognitive process for me is the development and application of expertise.
Yes, yes, yes. I understand. I understand what you mean, and the um, what I remember from your book is the visualization moments in the training process. So how to visualize how a project will go, if it will fail, why it will fail, just to train people, if you like, already ahead of what could come.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting, fascinating. So if people would want to find you or your company, the links will be in this episode anyway. But if you want to, you can just say where should I go to?
They should go to our website, www.shadowboxtraining.com. And my company, we have about 9 people in the Shadowbox company. I think 5 or 6 full time, and we've been in business over a decade. And it's been very exciting, and the future looks like it will continue to be exciting for us because the world is becoming certainly more complex rather than less. Uncertainties are increasing rather than diminishing, and decision making is playing a larger role in our society.
Yes, yes. And on that note, thank you so much, Gary, for being my guest today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. As I expected, I really enjoyed this conversation with you, Maurice.
Yes, likewise. Bye bye. Gary, thank you so much for your time today. It was such an honor to have you here, and I've enjoyed it every single second of it. To everybody else, if you found this as interesting as I did, then I guess you want to participate. I guess you have questions, maybe you have comments, or maybe you want to share your story. You are very much welcome to do so. Please sign up for our free community. go to intuitiveleader.net/podcast and sign up for community. The link is here below. And you'll be invited to live interactive sessions with myself and other professional intuitive leaders. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and maybe even more important, share it with those people that you truly believe would have an interest and a benefit from listening to it. For now, thank you so much for tuning in, and see you soon. Bye-bye.